Hi everyone. Hi, I hope we've had some good activity, dashing raindrops. Okay, so fantastic. Thanks ever so much for coming, for having me back. My goodness, these lights are bright. All right, the clock is sitting at 40, so I'm just going to start talking. Oh, no, it's just started at 39:59. Thank you so much for coming back. So we left off just but a few hours ago with this idea that we're accursed. The health burden of excess sitting is 34 chronic diseases and conditions. It appears that sititude is the segue, or a major segue, between modernity and all of those sort of chronic diseases that have been associated with modernity. So those harms are not, however, just the physical things, the diabetes, the obesity, so on and so forth, but also there are now actually data that people who sit more are less creative, people who sit more are more blue, and I'm not a bluist, but you know what I mean, a bit down. And so there is just so many reasons to get people up and moving. And so what I'd like to do is share with you some of the approaches we've taken, and obviously I'm not working because I'm here, so there are a load of people back in Arizona and Rochester, Minnesota who are working really, really hard, and really I'm just a spokesperson for them. And it is just such a pleasure to share their incredible work. You've got to meet these people, but actually you can't because they're working. So it would be brilliant to take these magic underwear that allow us to get these really exquisite data and spread them and have absolutely everyone wearing them. You know, Grant with Victoria's Secret, I can kind of see it now. We actually did approach them, didn't happen. I'm sorry? Put wings. I've got to think where's my patent attorney? Got it. However, wings on underwear. Am I kids? It's very interesting. Victoria's a very interesting company because, of course, they're now branded into pink, which is, you know, and I am a platinum pink card holder, I should tell you, right? And if you and anyone who knows what a platinum pink, I mean, I can go in before anyone else. I get best deals on the sales, and you know why I'm a platinum pink card holder at Victoria's Secret, right? No, because I've got daughters. 2 daughters. Anyway, so look, we couldn't take magic underwear and sort of spread them everywhere. But the technology that's really changed the world, and it's present actually in all of our smartphones, is the MEMS, is the microelectronic mechanical system. The way these work, very, very briefly, is inside of a chip. This is what's incredible. Inside of the chip are these moving teeth, inside of a silicon chip, and that's not a McDonald's chip, I mean an electronic chip. These moving teeth. And the more you move, the more the teeth move. And that measures your amount of movement. Now what's really cool about this is the technology, and actually what it's doing is measuring capacitance in real time, doesn't move up and down. And actually what happens inside of these chips, listen to this gives you a sense of what's really going on, is there are laser beams going across the planes of those moving teeth, and when they move up and down, they're broken the laser beams, all inside of a single silicon chip. So this is the MEMS technology. It's incredibly powerful. Now I would love to, but the clock is, all I can tell you is the way we sort of persuaded Apple to start working with us yonks ago, then this is when iPods were like the in thing, so it dates all of us, right? Was we sort of took down the magic underwear. I actually had the honor of doing a striptease in front of Tony Fadell, who was then the head of the iPod division. And when I got down to my underwear, his comment, he made 2 comments. He said, "You're not going any further." And his next comment was, "Are you really from the Mayo Clinic?" And then he said, he shook my hand and he said, "We're going to have a very fruitful working relationship." And what they did is we did a tech transfer to Apple. They took the technology, they put it inside of a shoe. And it's the bottom right, it's the Nike Plus system. And that was, you know, then there was a collaboration with Nike, and what that demonstrated, why that was powerful, way before all the other stuff I'm going to talk about in a second, the reason that was super powerful was because it demonstrated, not just to us, but more importantly to commerce, right, who aren't the enemy, right, because you can't do anything, you can't sell 15 million units out of a lab, right? It demonstrated that there was a true market for self-tracking technologies. Well, the next gig we got into was building this technology into an earpiece, shown in the top right. That's Chinmay's ear. Yeah, I'm sure you can tell. But the trouble with this, it was a good idea, the tech worked. And I can explain why we're interested in measuring right at the center of the trunk, at the ear, but it didn't work. We put a lot of time into it, and this technology does everything the Fitbit does and a lot more actually, but it didn't work because we couldn't beat the price point of earbuds. Now, alas, I didn't know Beats were coming down the line, did I? Whoever thought you're going to pay $300 for a pair of earbuds? Anyway, there you go. Christmas is coming yet again, right? So we then took the technology, and we actually got a grant from the army, very interesting project in Rwanda, because we're rebuilding big cities there, to say, well, if this urbanization is so important in obesity, could we beat off obesity by keeping people active as we're sort of recreating cities? And that's the sort of the blue box there, built with the army. Beautiful, beautiful circuitry. It's 5 circuit boards all squished together, and all the wires, there aren't any wires, but all the wires sort of feed them. It's just 3-dimensional. It is glory, 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 glory technology. So we built this, took us about 3 years to build it. NIH, bless them, wanted or insisted that we actually send 100 units, and they gave them to 9-year-old children in Washington, D.C. to test, and they were told to test them. Now, the imagination of children in destroying technology was phenomenal. I mean, the idea was that that they would get prizes and incentives for testing the technology, not destroying it. So we had one brother and sister take 2 of those things, and they measure your N.E.A.T. They measure your activity continuously for a year without a battery change, without a computer, without an upload. Perfect for like an army drop, perfect for population-based self-tracking. But these kids took 2 units, they put them behind their dad's truck without telling him. Dad rolled over it, ended the units. Another boy put it in a drying machine, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. Oh, another guy, very interestingly, put the unit under a chair leg and jumped up and down on the chair leg until it actually smashed. But from these disasters, I don't know why I'm telling you these disasters, but anyway, from these disasters, we kind of learned a lot. One of the things the lady in the middle is showing you is that if you're going to build these technologies, they've got to be cool, whether it's the Fitbit, and there are lots of other ones. And I don't earn money from any of these things, by the way, but there's a vested interest in changing the world, and which is sort of more valuable perhaps. So the Fitbit's kind of cool for old people, but like us. But if you're going to get the youth involved, you've got, and you see the girl there in the middle. I mean, she is like totally cool, right? She's the definition of cool. And what you can't see is she's actually wearing now a defunct technology, which is the Nike Plus band, but it fits in with her whole gig look, right? And so we learned that you've got to integrate fashion into the whole genre. And then at the back of our mind, we were thinking, my goodness, the iPhones are coming, the iPhone generation is coming, iPods are going to go, and inside those iPhones, a smartphone, it doesn't matter what phone you have, is that same technology with the moving teeth. That is actually how your phone knows to change from portrait to landscape as you flick it around. It's actually a MEMS triaxial accelerometer right in there. And we hacked into that very early on. And what we were able to do is to measure the amount of activity 10 times a second by measuring the amount of movement people wearing cell phones do. And so, okay, cool, App City, here we come. And again, we learned a lot from this. We had just had one postdoc working on this, and just by word of mouth, we had 7,500 users in about 4 months. Then Business Week picked it up. They named it one of their top 5 apps, and 2 days later, we had 28,000 users, and it completely crashed the University of Houston servers. We learned a lot. And what we learned, and you can see the data on the x-axis, is you get the same data out of an app on a cell phone that you get out of the magic underwear. Nearly all of human movement is N.E.A.T, as we talked about earlier, and here is a way of self-tracking at no cost. Now, if I'd have said we were just talking about my PhD supervisor, Marsha Morgan, very interesting person. If I'd have said to Marsha, I want to measure activity 10 times a second in 28,000 people, and I don't need any money to do it, she would have said I'm completely crazy. But you realize Fitbits are like, what, $35 now, they're going to go to 90, there are Groove Technologies, there's the CAM device, lots and lots of devices, there's Jawbone, they're all great, they're all terrific. But I'm telling you, those technology prices are going to go way down. I can't quite explain why at this exact moment, but suffice it to say I'm 100% certain. And we're going to be certainly in the 50 cent per measurement unit space. So you're going to be able to buy a sensor that tracks all this stuff and other things at about the 50 cent $1 margin. I'm 100% certain of that. Well, in so much as that I'm certain that tomorrow will occur, kind of thing. There's a slightly existential concept about being certain about anything. Anyway, at the back end of that, there are a whole load of people, we tech transferred the algorithms for doing all of this. There are a whole load of tracking devices now that you can get as apps and so on and so forth. And you get the sense that no, we don't need, in fact, to have everyone wearing special underwear, but what we can do is have a population interfacing through their movement, through being healthy, through being active. What an amazing, amazing, amazing opportunity. It's not just about activity, however. This was an app we built with the University of Newcastle. You take photographs of your food, and then people make comments on it. And in order to avoid conflicts of interest and disclosure and confidentiality, this is my food. And the brown thing is not a stool, it's a little chocolate thing. And and it's a very interesting experience when you photograph your own food and have other people comment on it. I mean, people who aren't necessarily rude to your face, like in your face, will be very rude about your food. It's quite interesting. But anyway, so that was ultimately sold to a social media company, and again, we validated it. We bought it, we tested how valid it was, and yeah, for 10 or 15 people, it's rubbish. It's not like doing doubly labeled water or anything kind of like that. But for when you're doing like 15,000 people, and I think we got up to 30,000 on this before it was moved on to a social media company, you actually got an idea of all the different foods that people were generally consuming and how they changed with the weather. Listen to this, how they changed with a football match. Like, whoa. And so there was now the technology, the capability of doing lots of different measurements of lots of different things. And that measurement space, by the way, is going to expand. It's going to get cheaper. But we're doing things like we're building things to test space, so spaces can be self-monitoring for activity. If you go into an office, your desk will know when you're sitting at it, and so on and so on. It's all happening. Very, very exciting. We started... Sorry? Office of the future. So you can start reimagining now dynamic moving, happening offices. They can be rebuilt and reimagined in lots of different ways. But when we think about technology, although I wouldn't describe myself as a geek. I would not describe myself as a geek. But I am a technophile. I do like, my PhD was in electronic engineering, for my goodness sake. But one of the most powerful technologies is this. I was working in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and these individuals are holding their certificates for becoming community health workers. Nothing to do with obesity, nothing to do with N.E.A.T, but what they're doing is they are trained specifically to go out into communities and have people take their retroviral anti-HIV medications. Right? They have no medical training, they're not trained as nurses, but they're specifically trained to do this absolutely specific task. And to me, that's a technology. So you see the Y out there doing their mass diabetes prevention program, and you've got this idea here that we're all going to go out and advocate for, but the part of those technologies aren't necessarily electronics and devices, but are these approaches, these highly scalable approaches, certification, the training manuals, and so on and so forth. It's a very powerful technology that we need to think about. So we started to get into this idea, is could we completely redesign the office space and rethink about how offices are built? Bit of trouble, almost got fired. The Mayo Clinic were building a new building, and this isn't being recorded, right? This isn't being streamed, and it's all completely confidential. We've got a HIPAA record somewhere, right? And we wanted to sort of test this idea that you can actually build a dynamic office. So I met with the person who was second in command for engineering at Mayo, a chap called Dave Idy, and said to him, I want to completely build this completely new office. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be dynamic. People are going to be moving. It's going to change the world. And he said, brilliant, brilliant. What do you need? And I sort of said, well, I completely need it to be redesigned and it should look like this. And I actually worked with the German design team to build these first treadmill desks, bike desks, and so on and so forth. And there were walking tracks. This place was utterly beautiful. We also commissioned a plant company to build bring in plant things so people could sit around. There were conference desks, the whole thing. Unfortunately, I didn't actually have permission to do this. And there was a sort of rather amusing moment where one of the members of the Board of Governors was waiting for me outside my office, which doesn't often happen. And he was a very sort of tall Irish chap, actually, was sat with his yellow pad, and he said, Jim, we have an expense list here that we can't really quite account for. It's sort of this office redesign. Do you have like the minutes from the committee meetings to explain quite how this came into Genesis? I said, we haven't quite got it to the committees yet, but Good Morning America is going to come. And he turned over the page, they're brilliant. And that's how we launched the Office of the Future. I mean, working with media is a very, very important thing. I think often in science we're very reticent to do that. But I think they can be our greatest ally sometime in terms of getting good messages out. We had 305 people working in this office space, and we only were asking one question. The question we were asking was, does productivity get worse if you have people walking and working? And the answer is no. Productivity does not get worse. And then we started to build more scientific studies. The first thing we had to do, no conflict of interest. I had a design patent which Steelcase bought from me many, many years ago. No more money has changed hands, at least in 5 or 6 years. They professionalized the whole idea of the treadmill desk. They made it cool, they made it snazzy, they made it fit inside an office space, and they made sure it was safe. So the treadmills only go to 2 miles an hour. The idea is that you stroll while you're doing your email, you stroll while you're doing your conference calls. The only things you can't do are fall asleep. And this, we've all sort of seen this in the press, and yeah, it was ridiculously expensive when it came out, like the VHS video camera was $3,500 when it came out, right? But then, like all of these things, these things you can now buy at Target. You can buy them at Walmart online, Target, for like $700, which is actually the same price as a regular office chair, as it happens. And so these things are sort of taken off. It's sort of all quite good fun. The whole program sort of came to a crashing halt when Diane Sawyer decided to put this live on television to launch it, and it seemed like a good idea. Steelcase was certainly very happy about that. So I showed up 6:30 in the morning, and they all sort of got this thing going. You can't really see it here. You got Deborah Roberts and a lady who's actually a professional basketball player, or used to be, and Diane Sawyer, who's a very valuable asset. And they all were talking about the treadmill desk, what a great way of working. And and they said, well, let's get on, let's do this interview, let's get going. I said, you can't do it in 5-inch heels. And Diane Sawyer looked at me. She has her own hairdresser. And she says, let's do it. And so we had these 3 ladies all walking on treadmills in 4.5, 5-inch heels, all in real time. And I knew on live television that if any of them actually fell off, it was over. But it was the opposite. Diane Sawyer's comment was, I could see myself working like this. I wish I'd always done it. Program was launched. And so companies started taking this on. And so all of a sudden you get the sense that these laboratory experiments, these sort of let's test it and see approaches, these collaborations started to bear hardcore fruit. Real offices were taking this on. We've now worked in 71 different US corporations. Many have taken these kind of things on in different ways. This happens to be Salo. And there are people who have their own desks. There are people who share desks. What's very interesting is when you're now trying to hire sort of a top-notch person from wherever it may be, having a treadmill desk is part of the sign-on thing. You want to come to we'll give you a free treadmill desk. Forget the BMW. This is what you need. And so this has moved beyond trend. This is very commonplace for all the high-end companies you've heard, all the sort of the Googles, Pixars, they all have loads of this stuff floating around because this is sort of the current vogue, the current cool. And so these are practical solutions and things that actually work. As all of these things are coming out, I think this is the Trek version, no conflicts of interest, about $700. So as these things come out, we bring them back to the lab and we take our labs out. We have our lab on a bus now. We have little labs that we have little laboratories that we build inside offices, and we test, and we validate, and we publish. Then what happened is then there came the standing desk. I actually thought it was a complete waste of time, how wrong I was. The standing desk I thought was not going to help anybody. I need people to be up and moving that 2.25 extra hours a day. Standing desks are not going to help. Standing's no good. Ergotron, no conflict of interest, however, said You can't be a scientist and just say it's no good. Why don't you do an experiment? They didn't fund it. So I said, okay, we did a trial. Prospective 1-year trial, just been published, Caldrea company. And what's very interesting, so when you deploy standing desks across an entire company, what actually happens is everyone's off their bottom. We want to have a quick discussion in accounting. Oh, I've got a quick question for you. People walk across. And we actually pitted out people with research-grade sensors. And what actually happens when you have standing desks is everyone starts moving around the office nearly all of the time. And in fact, people on average, for the entire office, will increase their walking during office hours by 1.5 hours a day on average. Really, really interesting. So in other words, you get people off their bottoms, they inevitably move. I mean, I suppose you would argue this is the inevitable, this is actually how humans are meant to be, no wonder they do it. We also, there are other alternate solutions. This is a little stepping device that goes under your desk, and the idea is every time the phone goes, you pull out the stepper and you step your way through your phone call. I will tell you that you cannot fall asleep while stepping on a stepper, and you get a little printout. It's got the technology embedded, a little printout at the end of the day, and different companies can compete. You can put these in conference rooms. They cost about $50, no conflicts of interest. And the idea is, different people like different things, and we're learning this now more and more and more. This has been ubiquitously successful. I've never done any gig at a corporation where this hasn't worked. If you think 78% of emails are a waste of time, you now need to move into the meeting territory. Do I need to say any more, right? Not only are meetings, meetings I'm involved in are not boring, nor are they a waste of time, but apparently everyone else's meetings are a complete waste of time. And it transpires, however, that if you do a walk and talk meeting, first of all, it'll be 11 minutes shorter on average, and second of all, just as useless as a sitting meeting would have been. So this is actually a very, very powerful, very inexpensive thing for companies to deploy, ourselves to deploy, and of course, all of my meetings, when they're scheduled on my calendar, literally are scheduled as walk and talk meetings and color-coded green. I mean, I look at my calendar and think, oh my goodness, I've got like 8 hours of forcible walking today. I'm not coming back. I don't know how many people there are here. Not one of you said, is that me? That is just such a weak comeback. All right, moving on. Bottom line, research. Yeah, it's good to take these things out, but I think what distinguishes us as a scientific community is not just the will and the desire and the hunger to test these things, but actually, I actually think there's sort of like a moral obligation. And so the idea, so when I go in front of a board and I sort of say, well, I actually know that your corporation's productivity, and I don't mean healthcare dollars, that's a different discussion. I mean hardcore productivity, numbers of loans processed in one example, number of financial packets processed per hour, another example. That productivity, hardcore productivity, improves by 11%. How about stress in my employees? Interesting question, paper 1. And again, when we go in to do these corporate gigs, I just did one in New York, we walk in with all of the publications, obviously, from other labs and our own, and they are 3 binders thick, and they're this thick. And I'm not talking about generic, stuff in mice and rats. Sorry to be ratist there for a second. I'm talking about stuff like this. So we know, for example, when you deploy these sort of very active office spaces, stress levels, because we measure it 3 times a week, actually increase. People get more stressed out. And they get more stressed out for almost exactly 2 weeks. Then what happens after 2 weeks is stress levels decline and decline and decline and decline on a linear scale, and we actually have the data in the curves. The first paper, which was just published this year, showed this. And so we can actually say, and this is very, very powerful when you're trying to persuade big corporate leaders what's actually going to happen, that yes, your cholesterol will improve, yes, your glucose, yes, your diabetes prevention, yes, your healthcare cost dollars, yes, your medication cost dollars, all of this stuff improves, but your workforce get less stressed, they get happier, theoretically more creative, and their productivity improves because we've measured it. And so I think that's quite important. Part of what we're trying to do is, part of what we're trying to do. If I had a prize, you'd get it. Oh, I know. I'll give you this wearable mic. Just joking. So thanks to Matt Damon for coming down to Mayo Clinic. We took a... I'm having way too much fun. Look, I'm done in 15 minutes. You guys can go. I'm just going to carry on talking. No. But we took a Nike tracksuit and we went to Giorgio Armani. I wrote letters actually to loads of other fashion houses. These were the only people who actually responded. And I said, what I'm trying to do is to create these kind of new offices where people are going to be moving around all the days and kind of doing really cool stuff, and people are going to be much more creative and innovative. And I said, what I want is a branding feel. I want to have a fashion sense of what this is going to look like. And I chatted with some people, generally in Italian, and off I went to Milan, which is actually amazingly depressing. It's actually anyone here been to Milan? It's actually an industrial city in the north of Italy, right? And it's hardcore. And interestingly, you think designing fashion, my concept was, I'd walk in, so give this same lecture, if you like, and they'd sort of get out their sketch pads and all get sketching away, and all be sort of very arty. But it's actually it's very, very interesting, actually very opposite. Everything's done on CAD, computer boards. They have a whole group that do fiber technology. And in fact, when it's all drawn up, and the collar they use, I should have worn the suit today, silly me. That's my bad, I do apologize, I should have worn it. But it's very, very interesting because the collar was an 18th century French collar that they deliberately picked to be representative of the Industrial Revolution. So this is serious. And then I sort of said, oh, can I see it when it's built? They said, yeah, sure. It'll come out of Singapore. And what they do is they fire it off basically through CAD, an electronic design system, to Singapore where it's built. So off I went to Singapore. And there it is. So it ended up on the things of Paris, it ended up all sorts of places. And then, of course, what happens is other members of the fashion industry see what they're doing and copy it. And so all of a sudden you get a sense. And already you're seeing the fashion houses are coming out with sort of cool active clothes, new types of shoes, all sorts of things. So activewear is on its way. So what we realized, though, after doing lots and lots of corporations and building programs and doing all this kind of thing, is that you can't just sort of go in willy-nilly and say, I'm going to help everybody get more active, blah, 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 blah. Here's the evidence. N.E.A.T is bad, sitting's bad. No, N.E.A.T is good, sitting's bad. Well, I don't know that. That was the test. You didn't pick that up. All right. So what we realized, though, is you have to be very systematic. So you're going to a big corporation, you've got to have your act in order. Yes, you've got to have the data. Yes, you've got to have the approach. And yeah, please copy this. I have no problems with that at all. And what we realized is that you actually need a very, very structured approach. And you can see from here, it's all these layers. We do every single layer with every single company. And I didn't know it was the same as the 12 steps for Alcoholics Anonymous. But I didn't actually know that when we were writing it out. We literally just based it on the companies we were working with. But it's so that they remember that. And so this is what we do. We work through these companies in a very significant, sustained fashion. There's lots of legalities as well. We have, de-identified data and so on and so on and so forth. But it's very, very interesting. And the companies that do this are not only cool and dynamic, but they're the ones who are successfully attracting the new blood. And so I think this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, also there's the clinical space. The 34 chronic diseases associated with excess sitting. How about patients? And so we spent, again, a significant amount of time. This is another company we're working with who are called Kirsch, and they work in health risk management. This is a very high-end device, research-grade device. Again, lots of details, but it's actually very interesting. What it actually does, since you ask, what it actually does is unlike any of the sort of the Fitbits and all who have a fixed accelerometer. It's a self-sensing accelerometer. So if you have somebody with congestive heart failure who actually is moving very, very little throughout the day, the device itself sort of tunes into the patient. And when the patient gets better and better, and we're now sort of a core lab for the NIH and all this kind of thing, and when the patient gets better, the device adjusts itself to allow the person to move more and more and more. And if even they were to start jogging or something, the device then picks that up too. It's sort of self-modulating. But I have to tell you, the chip itself from Kionics, if you were going to build your own device tonight, you would buy this chip anyway. It's not that expensive. Anyway, so we're working in all these different clinical spaces. A lot of them are very interesting. The only sort of thing I'll point out is that very quickly, this is a sort of a personal passion of mine. In America, there are 2 million homeless children. It's unbelievable. There are, and you go to the NIH website and you look, see how many grants are funded to devise the best health interventions for homeless children. There are basically none, right? These kids have basically been forgotten by society. But if you think about this poverty data, inactivity, sedentariness, obesity, diabetes, targeting poverty-dense regions is obviously a very smart thing to do if you're interested in improving the activity levels and the whole health of the population. So we're very interested in that space. We were criticized very early on for completely ignoring children. Obviously not, right? But anyway, you take it. There are good days and there are bad days. Can't think of a bad day, but there must have been one. I actually can't think of the last bad day I've had. That tells you a lot. Come and work at the Mayo Clinic. Anyway, so we were very heavily criticized for doing all of these corporate programs, building this quite big infrastructure to do all of this technology, devices, lawyers, IT people. How about the kids? What were you going to do for kids? So several years ago, we were sort of nudged by government to sort of use some of these resources to help kids. So we went to a group of kids and said, look, we've got to get you off your chairs. Forget that the teacher says stop fidgeting. We've got to get you moving throughout the school day. We want you to design a school around this philosophy. And these kids designed this school. It's a Socratic learning space, and they move around the space. It was funded by a whole series of builders, and Apple provided all the hardware and the software. And it's not the best slide to see the pictures, but you can see the kids sort of using this kind of space, and they're moving around the entire day. There are sitting spaces, but they're the minority. The teachers are using, it was very, very like concert level noise cancellation technology so they could teach the kids in real time. There are lots of sort of stories about how easy and difficult this was, mainly difficult. But what was very, very interesting was a couple of things. First, you can see all the kids were kitted up with this sort of technology. So what was really interesting is two things. First of all, the educational attainment of the kids, which was the primary driver from the head of the school system we were working with. These kids were tested against other kids at multiple points as they went through this process of moving into this new type of school. Grades improved in these children 15%, 15%. Yeah. Now, the data then on movement, in other words, if you just give kids a space, forget programs and telling them to do this and telling them to do that, if you just give them a space and permission to move throughout their day, the white bar nearest me becomes the black bar second along. They double the amount of daily activity. It's extraordinary. You allow kids to move. And when you actually watch them in these school spaces, they'll sit down and then suddenly either one or two or three will get up and start moving around. And it's really very, very interesting. And that's actually what happens. And we've now been involved in more than 90 school projects. There are some schools being built specifically to do this. And in Germany, as I'm sure you're aware, 2 out of 10 new schools are built as health schools. And what happens, again, I'm just summarizing data. There's now an institute in Minneapolis that on average, when physical activity is interspersed into the school day, educational attainment grades improve on average about 10%. If we're going to close the educational gap, here's the opportunity. But obviously you can't go around building schools all the time. I mean, it'd be fun and quite amusing, but you just can't do it. They're apparently strapped for cash. So in this example from Idaho Falls, this is an important example because the lady shown in the middle there is actually a mother. The only person sitting down in this classroom is actually the teacher, who's the bloke sitting at the back. But all the kids have these desks that were built especially for this school, all driven by fundraising from this one individual, from the mother. She sort of had read the material, she wanted her kids to be moving, and these kids were also in Idaho Falls tested against state average as they actually transformed their classroom. Their grades increased by 17%. And so, there are different ways of doing this. One thing we've been very interested in is building kits so that teachers can take regular furniture out of their classroom and put this kit in. The kit costs $500, no conflicts of interest. And what the kit allows kids to do, and we've got a whole structured way of doing this, is to learn while they're doing monkey bars, doing their spelling, jumping around. And it's all done on a whistle. It's quite military, actually. But it's very, very interesting. And actually, Here, this is with smaller kids, their specific spelling skills improve, their numeric skills improve. We did sort of quite complex. This is just in press as of about a week ago. So please, pick up the publication. But this is what it shows. This is really interesting. So so the idea is this classroom is kitted out like this, and kids go into the classroom for a lesson and then go out, and then other kids come in for a lesson and then go out. And the lessons are only 40 minutes. So you might say, well, that's just 40 minutes. What good that's going to do. But what's really interesting is when kids go into these spaces for 40 minutes, they're actually active the whole day thereafter. And if you then measure them during recess, they're then active during recess as well. So these shorter term, these much more modest programs can be very, very effective. And this is one of the schools we put in these classrooms. And this is what happened after control, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4 of kids going in and out of these classrooms just once a day for a 40-minute period, right? And it is really impressive. I mean, I'm sort of quite, it's really cool. And it takes so little. And we've also done programs now with 3 to 5-year-old children with 5-minute programs. You make them active for 5 minutes, and they're active all day. Kids will move if you give them the choice. It's actually harder to work with adults. And again, so I took these ideas and I showed the data to a corporate partner. Again, no conflicts of interest, no grants, nothing. Just explain what the data is, and has said, you guys have got to get into this space. This is Ergotron, and they've started now building furniture, regular school furniture, for kids to start using in classrooms where it's, where the teachers and the principals and the parents and so on approve it. And again, this was actually built originally for kids with ADHD. I could talk about that, but I haven't got time, because that became a common question I was getting. So, but what you see here is a classroom of kids all on bikes. And they can pedal when they want to, they don't pedal if they don't want to. And again, these are different types of learning environments. And this article speaks about what I've said. It's like with adults, productivity improves about 10 to 15%, kids' grades improve. And if anyone has a single study that shows activity not improving grades, please bring it to me, because I don't like to say things that are wrong. But to this point in time, I've never seen a study where kids' grades do not improve. Kids' grades always improve, therefore. Play. It's not just what kids do at school. This is modern play. This is a New York, totally cool space, right? Play shouldn't be like this, right? Active gaming is coming. I don't really think it's matured. I don't really think it's strong enough to truly overcome, War of the Worlds, whatever the latest one is, or, driving around Miami, sort of shooting people, whatever it may be, right? Or, but it makes the point at some level that you don't necessarily have to take the gaming out of the kid, but you have to get the kid up while they're gaming. I showed you this picture earlier, hanging with dad. I mean, it's not just what kids do playing even. We're responsible as parents too. I sort of wrote this, somebody very sweetly had one of the earlier books from the group. And I actually wrote this, I said, surely this, I can bear to go out for a walk with my daughter. We have one earbud in each thing, and I can listen to her music. Well, guess what? I became a bigger Eminem fan than she is. I mean, have any of you actually heard Eminem? I mean, it's beautiful, the poetry of it all. Okay. So how about cities? So we've done offices, we've done schools, and we know at home we've got to get ourselves up, we've got to get moving. How about cities? Well, what's really cool now is with GIS and all the new technologies, we can start to map out and redesign cities into different looks, and we can actually do cost analyses as to how these actually look. These are these are pictures from the UK. And what the point is, the critical point of this slide is that it is the same street. There is no rebuild. It is the same street, just people are moving around throughout it. I showed you this slide earlier too. This is a street in New York City. Right? This can be done. And when the analysis is done for San Fran, this is what you see. If San Fran was converted into these active spaces, no build, just converted into an active, dynamic, foot-based space as opposed to a car-based space, this is actually what is projected to happen. 2,400 lives would be saved. And to put that in perspective, that would rank it as the third largest improvement in public health in the last 2 centuries. The savings to San Francisco would be $34 billion. in healthcare costs and improved traffic into local shops. So, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. I was going to end with a plug, but okay, I'll stop there. Look. Options. Advocate. Washington. Beyond. Community. Brilliant. Advocate. Your workplace. School. Parent-teacher thing. Brilliant. Advocate in your house. Brilliant. But take control of your family and yourself, because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us and our kids, for all of us. And so please, just once extra, get home, get everybody up and do something fun and cool, and you'll benefit from it. Thank you.